Well, thank you for joining us. We do encourage you, always get interactive. Go also to share our streams. And we're streaming on TV3 Ghana, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Well, as we do that, I encourage you always to add the hashtag TV3 New Day. Let me say good morning to Nikal. You live in Charlotte in the United States of America, as well as your better half, Angela, sweet lady, as well as the children. And thank you for everything. You're a great guy. I have to say you're a great guy. And then Dr. Agbamoji, good morning to you as well. And then Moses and all of you. Always tune in to TV3 New Day. Let me just do an introduction of our guest this morning. Communicating for the government of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and also the ruling New Patriotic Party, the distinguished Kofi Tonto is here. Good morning to you, Kofi.
Good morning.
Monitoring a lot of information coming in, being streamed. How are you?
Distinguished, I see.
You're not. I think you are.
Well, okay.
I think you are.
I'm grateful.
I think you are.
Thank you very much.
You're a gentleman, actually. I've been watching you a lot.
Indeed I am. I agree with you.
I always love your communication.
I'm grateful.
I have to be sincere. Yeah. And then also, a former chair for the PNC, Bernard Mornah, is also here with a red beret that famously was worn by Che Guevara, and subsequently Samora Machel and others joined the fray years after. And he's here. Bernard Mornah, how are you?
No, you should have added the undistinguished to Bernard Mornah.
All right. The undistinguished Bernard Mornah. Thank you very much. And then also, Eduji Tamaklo is a legal practitioner. He's also a member of the NDC's legal team. Thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Roland. Good morning to my client who is not paying, and Kofi Tonto, the distinguished.
Bernard is your client.
Yeah,
oh, okay. I didn't know that.
He doesn't like to pay.
But
he doesn't like paying.
When
so
the morning is not good,
gratis.
how
Pro
can
bono.
your clients
Also
pay?
joining us on the stream, we have Professor John Gachi. Professor John Gachi is the Dean for the University of Cape Coast Business School. And significantly, we've added him to the conversation because John Dramani Mahama, the now elected presidential candidate of the opposition NDC, has decided to go into the fray of trying to suggest that, well, for the banking sector cleanup, which involved ultimately, as we have to put it rightly, the collapse of some banks because there were some foundational points based on investigations or audits that have been undertaken, he could do some other actions of remedies. What does it mean? It means the shareholders could get their banks back, etc. We want to have a focus on the former president, what he said in his acceptance speech of being elected in that UDS auditorium that took place yesterday in Tamale. And Professor John Gachi, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Okay, great. Now, let me start off by giving you a clue of what really John Dramani Mahama said. We have this put together.
And we will create a tiered banking system that will serve various segments of the market. We will give the opportunity for experienced banking hands who were laid off and needlessly to secure their careers once more and move away from the menial jobs that they were compelled to take. As far as practicable, the banking licenses that were unjustly cancelled by this government will be restored.
Meanwhile, Dean of the University of Cape Coast Business School, Professor John Gachi, says the idea is feasible.
And we have him on stream. Good morning to you, Professor John Gachi. You said the idea is feasible. How is that? And based on other benchmarks and practices in the developed world, how could we do that?
Well, I don't know which practices and development in the developed world you are talking about. I think this is a very straightforward matter. If people were given licenses to operate and those licenses were taken from them unjustly, it is only proper that the right thing be done. Some of them may be given some kind of compensation, and some of them should have their license restored to them. So it's a straightforward matter. And I said yesterday that if you imprison somebody unjustly, it is found out that you don't have to imprison such a person. You remove the person from prison, restore his life and all the rights that he has in life, compensate him. So the same thing applies to the banking sector.
Now, I know that in the run-up to the announcement, there were criticisms about the mode that was used. Alternatively, what could have been undertaken in that decision by the Bank of Ghana to perhaps better do, whether it was administration or liquidation or, those others, as far as this is related?
Well, the mode is a concern. In some cases, it was very harsh. It was not forward-looking. But beyond the mode, there are clear indications that some of the processes that were used were not, so to say, legal. They beg the question whether we were doing these things to actually clean the banking sector, to make it more sound and more, responsive banking. So the processes will have to be looked at. For example, if you claim that because you charge somebody for criminal offense and that is enough to take license from the bank, then that is questionable when you subject it to the criminal jurisprudence of this country. So those are the issues that ought to be looked at. I can't say that all the banks are unjustly dealt with. Definitely some of the banks that were not dealt with in accordance with what is where the practice ought to be, will have to be brought back to the original status. So that is the point.
Right. And so if a decision will have to be taken, in what way would that be done?
I believe we had an opportunity in this country where people came and give testimony about their experiences, about a particular regime, the difficulty they face. The same process for me is the best process. People have a heap of anger in their heart as a result of the experiences they went through the banking sector. We need to allow those people to vent out their frustration, to vent out their bitterness, to vent out their experiences. And it is through that process that you can determine whether or not people have been dealt with fairly in accordance with law, or they were not dealt with fairly. We had situations where people were actually in talk with the central bank in the morning. In the afternoon, they were handed a letter that their banks the license have been revoked. Those are bitter experiences. So we need to create a platform for these people to vent out all these experiences and bitterness against the state. Okay.
I think that just hold on now. We'll come back one more time before we let you go. Neduji, the former president, at least you know that the Bank of Ghana is the main independent body that does the regulation, etc. So when he makes these statements, is it from, I would say that an ignorant position, but is it from an advisory position or an informed position?
Okay, so good morning to your cherished viewers and my colleague panelists. I want to thank the rank and file of our party for the peaceful manner they conducted themselves in the last parliamentary and presidential primaries. By the support of the Almighty God, we have gotten our flag bearer elected, most of our parliamentary candidates for the 2024. I am particularly encouraged by the fact that today, as we speak, with the mess the Akufo-Addo Bawumia administration have created, the NDC requires a very comfortable majority in Parliament for the necessary reforms that would ensure that we restore micro stability back as far as this economy is concerned. But that said, yesterday in the acceptance speech of H.E. John Dramani Mahama, the leader of the NDC today, among other things, is the promise to restore the banking licenses that were, in the most bizarre, capricious manner, with the benefit of a stroke of a pen, revoked. He is going to restore. I have listened to the respected professor, a colleague lawyer, Professor John Gachi, makes the point that, first of all, it's regulation. It's licensed, right? So at the end of the day, remember that the Bank of Ghana exists with human beings who run it. Unfortunately, the Akufo-Addo administration came to power with one view: to destroy indigenous participation in banking. And let the point be made that all over the world, domestic or indigenous capital formation is at the bedrock of national security. Because anytime you have foreigners controlling your financial sector, it creates a national security problem for you. And so, if you look, it has always been the position by liberals to ensure that you have as many of your own managing the formation of capital in the country. Unfortunately, Akufo-Addo came with a mindset to destroy.
How do you draw that conclusion?
I will tell you. You see, when we were in power, by reason of our engagement with the IMF and the World Bank, we had done the asset quality review of most of the banks, realized a problem. So at that time, there used to be a Bank of Ghana Act. So this time around, in 2016, we went to Parliament and got Parliament to pass the Banks Deposit Taking Institution Act, Act 930, which is a product of the NDC administration, assented to by President Mahama, to give a regulatory, the regulatory framework in resolving the asset quality review report. Very important. But you see, because the NPP were not the makers of that law, when they came, they took a more cavalier view of the law and decided that they will have to use brute force in the name of regulation to destroy businesses that have been created by people. I have always maintained that the Akufo-Addo administration, the Akufo-Addo Bawumia administration, had two options. One, to revoke the licenses. Two, and which was the most sensible approach, to dilute the shareholding. There's a
and re-inject capital.
Yes, there's a
that was the option the NDC wants.
Yes, there's a template. What template is that? When President Obama took over from George Bush, there was the financial crisis.
Yes.
A lot
that
of
led the U.S. to recession.
Yes. A lot of these banks and financial institutions, insurance companies in the U.S. were going through a lot of challenges. So if you recall, AIG, the American Insurance Group, most of the banks were going through challenges. The Obama administration had every opportunity, including automobile companies, had every opportunity to say, we will destroy those businesses or revoke their licenses. What did the Obama administration do? They came out with what is now known as the bailouts and diluted the shareholding structures of those banks. So the two women who approached King Solomon, one recommended killing the baby. The other one said, no, don't kill the baby. Allow the baby to grow. It will flourish and serve all of us. King Solomon eventually agreed with the woman that recommended that the baby be kept. Not the foolish woman who recommended the killing. Unfortunately, our government took a very foolish approach to the banking sector cleanup.
How do you draw the conclusion?
Very
because
foolish.
both were legitimate.
It's not about
but you are saying not white.
It's the foolishness.
You are saying both legitimate but not white.
I didn't say it's illegal.
Yes.
I said it is foolish.
Okay.
Something can be legal but foolish. In this case, The Akufo-Addo administration took a very foolish and bizarre approach, destroying jobs, destroying the economy itself. And remember, from the time we went through the banking sector cleanup, this economy had never been revived. The point I am making is that we had the option at that time, okay, to have diluted the shareholding structure. Now, I give a classic example. If your position is that, for instance, a bank has not been run well, you can punish the shareholders.
Take us as an example.
Yes.
At this table.
So on this table, you are saying that the management of this bank is not good.
New Day Bank.
New Day Bank is not good. What you can do is that you can, so maybe the shareholding, Kofi Tonto here is 80% share. You say, no, Kofi, by reason of your misconduct or the way you've not managed
flouting of the bank
the
regulation,
rules and others, you can no longer. But government of Ghana will now take maybe 70% and then bring directors to now come and manage the business.
until the bank was
So
resuscitated.
it is like it happened in the US.
Okay.
So that option was available, but government of Ghana decided. And let me give you a classic example, so I can just look at Heritage Bank. Akufo-Addo Bawumia decided to revoke the banking
It is
license.
Bank of Ghana. What do you mean by Akufo-Addo?
No, I beg you. Akufo-Addo and Bawumia decided to revoke the banking license of Heritage Bank, not because of insolvency, not because their books were bad, simply because of who the shareholder was.
How did you draw that?
A very
conclusion?
tribalistic move.
No, you cannot draw that.
Look, you see,
If I remember,
hold on.
Heritage Bank very well,
Akufo-Addo had been
they
treated.
did not meet capitalization.
No, they did. They did. In fact, it was the most solvent. Why? At the time, the banking license of Heritage Bank was taken. Prudential had the same problem, even more insolvent. But they were left to go and grow eventually. They used Govt, their amalgamated trust, to help them up. So if it was an issue of insolvency, you could have helped Heritage Bank. Granted, your position is correct. But the whole idea was to destroy. Because they never saw Sedu Agongo to be one of them. And so destroy it.
All right.
And the pain is this. The pain is this. And I want to make this point. Look, if your child is sick and government becomes aware that by reason of your negligence, the child is not well, what government will not do is to kill the child. Government can take the child from you, give it to social welfare. Social welfare manage this baby for us. But government is not
So
in
the government
business.
should have done the monitoring from ICU.
Absolutely.
Until you get to adult emergency and then you are discharged.
What Akufo-Addo and Bawumia decided to do is to kill the baby and leave the
Kofi
father
Tonto,
down.
He does acknowledge that it is not an illegal decision that was made. It's because even from the time of the John Mahama administration, it had been identified that the banks were in trouble. Indeed, the Bank of Ghana was injecting capital in some of these banks. And these were well known as well, UT, for example, and some of them. Now, if we have individuals like Salim Adams, who are monitoring our streams, David Naba, and a couple of them, Jones Kobe, who are saying that it's because the government is wicked, the decision was unwise, etc. What would be the best response to them? Because they have relatives who lost jobs, etc.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. A very good morning to my senior brother, Bernard, and then also my senior brother, Eduji. He's extremely dramatic. He's actually carved a niche for drama, Eduji.
What he's doing is drama.
Yeah, he's become an expert when it comes to dramatizing issues. You know what he just did? He indicted himself. Read the headline he gave us. What did President Mahama say? If you read the exact text, President Mahama said, Bernard, that as practicable as possible, we are going to give back the license to banks that President Akufo-Addo took illegally. Read the text. President Mahama called it an illegality. But you are sitting here contradicting what President Mahama said, Eduji. So you don't even have a stance as a political party. Your candidate, your flag bearer goes to mount a platform and calls something an illegality, and you sit here and you say it's not an illegality. So what's your purpose? You have contradicted what President Mahama said. That in itself should tell you how unprepared they are in the analysis.
Just by the
because on what
pronouncement.
basis did President Mahama say he's going to give the licenses back? He said because they were done illegally. That's why we are here, to discuss this issue. Because if they were done legally, then President Mahama wouldn't have an issue. President Mahama has an issue because he deems it illegal. And you have a representative of an NDC sitting here saying that, no, it is legal.
Kofi, that said.
No, I'm coming. Okay. No, I'm coming. Now, the other issue is that President Mahama was very careful in his language. He said, as practicable as possible. Do you know why he used those words or the verbiage or the phrase as practicable as possible? Because he knows that he cannot do it out of his whims. He needs to follow due process to establish the so-called illegality, if any. So he was being careful.
Okay.
Because he has no basis to call it illegal. So he says, as practicable as possible. If something is as practicable as possible, it means that you are going to assess the possibility of the action before you undertake it. Is that not so? So you haven't assessed the possibility of your actions. And you go and mount a stage to make promises.
You think the former president went without...
I mean, that's all he's doing. If you read through his speech, all the so-called solutions President Mahama proffered are all things that are already being done, or things that are, basically done already. And I'll take time to go through some of the examples.
No, yes, please.
But I refuse to go the tangent Eduji went.
Which tangent?
By calling certain decisions foolish. Because if I choose to do the same...
How would you call those decisions?
They were prudent decisions. And if people have issues with prudent decisions government have taken, they have every right to seek legal redress. Now let's start with the issues. Eduji says that you don't kill the baby. But do you know President Mahama made an attempt? Do you know that? That before President Akufo-Addo came, President Mahama saw the challenges in the banking industry. So it wasn't even President Akufo-Addo who established the challenges in the banking industry and saw that the banking industry was on the verge of collapse. It was actually President Mahama who first saw the challenge.
He's never shied away from that.
Yes, and so he gave them money. Do you recall
600 million.
600 million. He gave them money.
Well, these are public things.
No. Eduji made a statement that you don't kill the baby. What Eduji was referring to was that you take certain actions versus collapsing the businesses. And I'm saying that those certain actions were already taken by his government, by President Mahama. And those actions failed. And that's why Atu Essien is in court. Part of why Atu Essien is in court is because the monies that were given to him to resuscitate the banks were chopped.
You're sure?
But why is he in court? The court has proven him guilty. Is that not so? He's supposed to refund money. Is that not so?
Yes.
Because the monies that were given to Atu Essien were chopped. This is a fact. President
They were
Mahama
misapplied, according to...
misapplied. If you like the big English, that's fine. But the point is that President Mahama saw the cracks. He saw that the banks were on the verge of collapse, and he provided an antidote, which failed. Let's establish that fact.
Okay.
So President Mahama cannot pontificate as though he's an angel. He isn't. He failed to manage the crisis. So let's start from there.
Kofi.
You don't fail. No, I'm coming. You don't fail in managing a crisis. Then turn around and pretend to be an angel and say that when I come, I'm going to do. You are going to do what? You do nothing, Mr. Mahama. Absolutely nothing. Go through his so-called speech. Empty. Hollow. Nothing meaningful.
The speech is so cold.
I can give you several examples. I'll give you an example. He talks about tax exemption. Do you know, just September 2022, President Akufo-Addo assented to the new tax exemption bill? Do you know? Just 2022.
It's a public
which your
information.
parliamentarians were there. Your MPs were there. So Bernard, you bear me out. Your MPs have participated in a newly tax exemption law. Then you come and stand on a stage and promise another tax exemption. What were your MPs doing in parliament? Then President Mahama goes on to talk about corruption. Mr. Mahama, just the election that elected you, the elections that elected you, candidate Mahama, that election was fraught with corruption. It's not me saying it. There were videos of your delegates saying that you gave every person 40 cedis. All the 300,000 people 40 cedis.
What does that got to do with the banking sector collapse?
I'm coming. I'm telling you, a man who is making promises, who has failed to deal with those promises when he had power, and now pontificating as though he's an angel. He isn't. I'm giving you an example of who he is. Now, let me go back to the example I was providing. Now, Mr. Mahama says he's going to fight corruption.
That's what he said.
You give 40 cedis to each candidate. And then your delegates come out and say that within your party, your executives that you gave money your executives that you gave money to have chopped the money.
Banking sector collapse. That's what we're talking about.
What?
We're talking about the banking sector.
No. I've already explained to you
that he can't be trusted.
He can't be trusted. That's the point I'm making.
Okay.
And I've established to you that he can't be trusted because the banking crisis occurred under him and he failed to manage it. And I'm giving you several other examples of things he said, which shows that he can't be trusted because they have already been done or he had the opportunity to fix and he failed. Now, on the banking crisis, what occurred? What transpired? Now, there are issues of capital adequacy ratio. There are issues of capital requirements. You know, in the case of Premium Bank, there was an issue of capital requirement. At that time, you needed 120 million Ghana cedis to set up a bank. And anyone listening to me can go to gh.ghreceivers.com and read the language and the explanations government provided for every single bank as to why the bank was collapsed. Some of the reasons, as I've started, capital adequacy ratio, some of the banks were in a negative 125% capital adequacy ratio. Some of the banks' capital requirements, they didn't meet it. So, for example, they will say that I have 120 million cedis. I'm wrapping it up. 120 million cedis. That 120 million cedis, I will provide 30 million cedis. Then I will take that money, provide documentation as though I've provided the 30 million, then transfer that 30 million in my name to Bernard. Then quickly come up with fake documents, and then Bernard will transfer the money to Eduji. So you do it 4 times, you get your 120 million, but the value is actually 30 million. So when we come back, I'll delve into deeper issues that transpire.
There are deeper issues you have to deal with.
Of course, there are more issues here that transpire.
Now, Bernard, there are financial banking regulation issues, there are policy issues, and then there are, the social intervention decisions that also needed to be taken. Is that not what has been the thrust of the conversation? And because it led to a lot of, we're supposed to have spent 9 billion. Then over time, it ballooned. So we're looking at the scorecard.
Well, I feel very sad when everything that should lead to a leap in our economy is looked at from the partisan perspective. As humans, we correct our errors in order to move. And I'm just sitting here and wondering if my brother Kofi Tonto were to be the coach of the Black Stars when Ghana played Uruguay the first time in South Africa. And Asamoah Gyan hit the ball and everybody jumped in celebration only to realize that it hit the goalpost. Asamoah Gyan would not have been made to come and take the penalty shootout at all because he had missed a penalty. But he was given the opportunity, and when he came, he took the first penalty and he scored. What it means is that he had learned on how not to score a penalty and came back immediately to inspire the team by leading to score. To sit here and say that because some banks were distressed under John Mahama and he was not able to find solution to it, sitting and talking today means that he cannot find solution. It means that we are not actually a progressive group of people.
Or his argument that he's not a legitimate right.
I just cited Asamoah for you. I don't know whether you, if your coach Kwesi appear, he will. That means that Asamoah had lost the legitimate right, as you are putting, to retake any penalty. But he was allowed to take penalty. What does that tell you? That indeed you are given the second option to prove yourself, and I think that that is it. So in our governance, people would make initial mistakes. They sit down, and when they have a reflection, they are in a position to say that, look, we could have done A, B, C, D, and we did not do. So it is time now to do this way so that we can correct it. See, some ones of us have held this continued position.
Which is what?
That the banking sector collapse was very reckless, it was needless, it installed on us so much cost.
No, these are harsh words.
Could you give me alternative? It installed on us so much hardship. See, not only, you remember the collapse of the Capital Bank and UT banks. We were told one day that they were collapsed, that all the workers, their jobs were going to be protected. That same day, I made a pronouncement. How is the CEO of Capital Bank, the CEO of UT Bank, going to also be CEOs at Ghana Commercial Bank? You are saying that they are going to maintain their positions. So you want to say that all of them were still going to be CEOs? Certainly, those CEOs were going to lose their jobs. President Nana Akufo-Addo, the governor of Bank of Ghana and the minister for finance, they lied to the people of Ghana.
Oh, how? What do you say they lied?
In fact, they told a great untruth because the CEO of Capital Bank was not maintained. The CEO of UT Bank was not maintained. They were sacked. They lost their jobs. There and there. The day the banks were collapsed, they lost their jobs. But we were made to believe that they will not. Have you forgotten recently that a court passed judgment, that for the period that these workers, about 137 of them, had not gone to the work, they were taking off their jobs, that the bank, they should pay them for all the years that they have not worked. That is judgment. And once it is a court decision, unless it is contested, it means that we are sitting on judgment that these people are rich but for not working. That is recklessness on the part of those who took the decision. See, if you take a bank like Heritage Bank,
Or GM Bank.
tell me what their crime is, Heritage Bank. I've told you. The crime of Heritage Bank is that the owner or founder of Heritage Bank was in court. And they, you see, I wanted to use some word that I'm not.
No, use it. Once it's palatable, we'll accept it.
You understand?
Is it
the
palatable?
silliness of our decisions
Okay.
is that I am in court. The court has not made pronouncement. Then I say that because you are in court over some malfeasance, reason is that you should not continue to man or own a bank. So you collapse Heritage Bank. That is all. What were the illegalities that Heritage Bank had committed?
Didn't meet capitalization.
Which one?
Wanted to use
Let me tell you.
Debt.
Kofi Amwabin, Prince Kofi Amwabin, publicly said that UT Bank had actually applied to Heritage Bank and they were at the point of being supported. You understand? They were just about being supported so that they can survive the crisis.
Actually, also with another consortium from Germany.
Yes, they were at the point of being supported so they can survive the crisis, maintain their workers, and improve the service delivery. We took a very reckless, useless position to collapse the bank. You decided to collapse local banks. Banks that are owned by Ghanaians who toiled. You decided as a state not to provide them opportunity so they can survive. Your recklessness led to many. You remember the young lady who committed suicide because she was laid off from the banks? Go round. Most of the Uber drivers, the Bolt drivers.
I actually had a mate from the University of Ghana business.
You understand?
3 of them
who were working at the bank.
driving Uber.
They are doing Uber. Why? Because they were working in the financial sector and the banks were collapsed. You are taking it only from the banks. Microfinance institutions, why? All those things were collapsed. The capacity to mobilize local savings has also been denied because, for instance, GN Bank, that was almost in every community in this country, mobilizing savings. You came with your Minister for Finance, who is not fit for purpose.
Okay, so
combined with the Governor of Bank of Ghana to cause this mess, and then you are here.
No, you do.